Hello, Lord's House of Prayer City Leadership Team. Today I'm going to cover the last video on the Staff of Direction. Last week we covered Principles 1 and 2. If you did not watch the video, please stop. Watch that one before watching the rest of the video 2. If you missed it, the link is provided in the email I sent you. But today we're going to continue on in this video covering Principles 3 and 4. Principle 3 being that the staff that a shepherd uses is to rescue the sheep when they wander off. And 4, the staff represents our responsibility as leadership to encourage the flock in moving forward. Before we continue with the last 2 principles, Pastor Mark is going to share some wisdom on what vision means, and we will again dive much more into this Sunday. So listen to what he has to say.
This is the second video. I know that you've seen the first video and it was talked about vision, so I want to talk a little more about vision and what vision is and how you get it. First of all, vision is something that you ask for, something that you desire, and you ask God, and He will begin to give you a vision or a dream. And a dream is something that is in the future and that you would like to get to, the same as a vision. It says in the scripture, without a vision, the people run wild. That means that there is no direction. So vision, number 1, gives you direction. Number 2, vision is a way that you can accomplish what God asks you to do. So it is out there, God gives it to you, but you have to ask yourself, well, how do I get out there to complete what God has told me? To complete it, you have to have goals, steps. In other words, you have to think, what would it take for me to do what God has asked me to do? And it may be spending time in prayer. It may be doing things, but there are incremental steps to the end that you have to fulfill the vision. So you have goals that you have to systematically put out ahead of you to reach the vision. In other words, it's like in a race where you have demarcation points. You have a certain demarcation point where you speed up or slow down, you keep a certain pace, and you get to the end, the finish line. And so the same is you get to accomplish the vision when you do these steps or these goals. So first of all, you have to ask God, and He will give you a vision. Or if you have, in a sense, a dream that comes up in your heart, it's really God speaking to you, giving you that vision, which is out there in the future. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, how do I get there and what will it take? So the number 2, you begin to set goals. You don't try to set a goal, one goal to get you all the way there. You just set a goal to get you partially the way there. And then at that demarcation point, you ask for another goal. So in all these things are ways that you begin to accomplish that vision. Vision is something that is in the supernatural realm. Goals are in the natural realm. So what you're doing is walking by faith, where you're reaching with your arms of faith into the supernatural realm and bringing it back into the natural realm. And that's what goals are in the natural. Vision is in the supernatural. And you are the instrument that brings the two together, the supernatural and the natural.
Wasn't that good stuff? Like I said, this Sunday we are going to cover much more in depth what vision's all about. But let's move on to the last 2 principles of the Staff of Direction. First, remember Principle 2. Don't micromanage people. Give clear instructions, give clear boundaries to stay with them, and allow people freedom to use their unique giftings and their talents to get the job done. I'll give you an example. This past election, I was a judge of elections, and I had a staff of 6 people. I set the boundaries. Some of the boundaries were different than the election before, but I made them very clear. And then I let the people do it the way that they thought best. And when I gave them movement to do it a little different than I would, it really, the effectiveness of the team was amazing. And everybody was able to use their giftings without being micromanaged. Usually micromanaging causes people to not work to their potential. But giving them the movement to be creative and use their talents does. Well, it's only a matter of time until someone that you're leading strays away from the boundaries. What are we to do when this happens? Here lies principle 3. What does a shepherd do? Shepherds count the sheep. And when one is missing, they go looking for him. A lot of bad things can happen to a sheep if and when it goes astray. They can get preyed upon or find themselves in a position they can't get out of. So a shepherd's job is to go find them and bring them back. What does that have to do with vision, you might ask? And what does it have to do with people? Well, after setting a vision and communicating it clearly, the boundaries in which they're supposed to stay in, no matter how hard you try to keep everyone moving forward in the same direction, some people are going to wander off and they're going to get in trouble, as you and I both have encountered. They may want to do things their own way. Some lose sight and just get distracted. Some have an issue with the shepherd, the one who's leading, or maybe they have a different vision than you. If a leader does not go off and find the one who's lost, who've wandered off from the boundaries, or deal with the situation, it very well can become a growing problem. And that problem will soon affect not just the person who wandered away, but it will begin to affect other people around them. And we have all experienced that, and that never turns out to be a good thing. So our job as leaders is to go out and find the one who is wandering or the one who's in trouble. Let me give you an example. I'm going to generalize it because I've had to deal with this many times. But I once had a leader who had wandered off, got themselves into some trouble. When I found out about it, I didn't go with them and judge them and knock them down further. I went to rescue them because I cared about them. I wanted to see them rescued. I want to get them out of trouble so that they could get back into the flock and back to moving forward. And in this, in different situations, sometimes I had to give them a time of rest, a time to rebuild their own lives and get back to just being faithful again. And in almost every one of those situations, when the person walked that road of recovery, they got back in moving within the boundaries and ministered again. That's what our job is to do. Our job is to rescue people that go astray and give them opportunity to be restored. That's what Jesus does to us. So we need to do that to others. The result of when you do that is people's loyalty increases because they know that you're really for them and not against them. They know that you stayed with them even when they were damaged from going off and out of the boundaries and getting hurt. And that relationship actually has a chance to grow even stronger than before. So some of you are thinking, well, what if that person doesn't want to change? Well, you'll know that, and you'll know it by their fruits. If they don't want to change, you can't make somebody change. The only one you and I can change is ourselves. So our responsibility is to rescue those who go off and to give an opportunity to them to get back on. Sometimes it's not that they wandered off and did anything bad. Sometimes it's just because they're not within the vision that we've set. They're doing something totally different. And two visions never work. So if they're going to work under us, we've got to rescue them and believe the best about them and get them back in line with what God has called us to do, our vision. If they're not willing to do that, then perhaps then they need to find a place that, or a leader they can submit to. But if they can't submit to that, that's a red flag in leadership there. If they can't submit and they're not willing to submit, then that becomes a hard issue. But that's another subject. Now, let's talk about the last principle, principle 4, the staff that the shepherd carries represents the shepherd's responsibility to encourage his flock. The shepherd sometimes uses the staff of encouragement to separate the sheep from the rest of the flock, so the sheep can be pulled close to that shepherd, and some that means a lot. Like when we take the time to pull one of our people aside and privately just encourage them, that means so much to people. Remember the last time somebody did that to you. The other thing the shepherd will do with that staff is gently stroke the side of the back of the sheep. Now, I'm not telling you to stroke each other, but it's a signal to the sheep that they're noticed by the shepherd. In other words, the staff is used to show the sheep comfort. Your presence alone comforts those who are following you. Nothing reassures the sheep more than the presence of the trusted shepherd. And you are a shepherd to people, and your presence alone means a lot. Good shepherds don't forget to encourage their people now and again. I'm not saying we got to encourage them every time, and if we don't, then that person's, because if people grow up that they always need encouragement, then we set them up for failure sometimes, because if they don't get encouragement, then they're feeling like, well, I'm not doing a good job. So there's a good balance to everything. Listen, good shepherds, they don't forget to encourage people now and again. Some of the best leadership is when you and I choose to pull a brother or sister who are downcast right next to us and just feel our support. Many times no words are needed. And it doesn't have to be all the time. It just has to be intentional. I'm not saying you can't share what needs to be improved, but we need to be intentional to see the good in those working with us and take the time to let them know. God does this with us all the time. Our God is not a God who is always pointing out our failures and our mistakes, so why should we be like that? If we find ourselves being like that, we need to ask God to change our hearts, because we have an issue, and if our hearts are hard like that, we will not be effective leaders. Let me give you an example. When I was youth pastoring, we have, and still have, the boundaries set. When we have youth staff, it's just known. No male leader is to place themselves alone with a female teen, and no female leader is to be alone with a male teen. We had a situation one time where one of our staff, really great person, in worship, when God was moving, God would begin to touch the heart of teens. And these teens would sometimes get a staff and just begin to pour out their heart, and there's ministry that occurs. Well, one time, this staff person went next door, because it was loud, and went across the aisle into another room, and I knew they were going to minister, but I immediately saw that and went next door and saw that they were separated, and I knew they were ministering, but I walked in. My presence was there. I didn't want any trouble. I rescued them. And then I let them minister, and then I prayed with them and they were done, I went to the person and I encouraged them. I knew they meant the best for that teen, and walked out of the boundaries. And so I said, thank you so much for ministering. See that? I rescued them, and now I'm encouraging them. And then I said, because I believed the best. I knew they weren't deliberately doing it to cause trouble. So believe the best. And then I said, now, you kind of crossed the boundary though. What did you think you did wrong? They're like, they knew right away. I did it on my own. Yeah. And I don't want you to get in trouble, because that could really harm you and the ministry. So what do you do next time? Bring someone with me. Bring a female with me. Yeah. That's what you do. And so rescue, encourage, and point in the direction of back into the boundary. For me, God has given me the gift of encouragement. It comes relatively easy. For some of you, it'll take more effort, but it has to be done. The enemy of encouragement and encouraging others, I believe, comes down to complacency and insecurity. If you're not secure in yourself, you're going to find it hard to encourage others. And in fact, you might get jealous if others get it and you don't. Remember, leaders endure so others can excel. Complacency is the second thing. Complacency is, this is the one I fall into, even though I have the gift of encouragement. It's easier not to encourage those who are around you a lot. Like family, which we as a church are, you just get used to each other. You get used to them doing a good job. And it happens to all of us. Complacency sets in and we stop encouraging because we're used to them. But this is where we all have to grow, and we need to learn that we need to encourage each other all the more, like the Bible says, especially family. And this is the area I need to grow, and we all need to grow in. We also have to know that when we don't get the encouragement we desire, that we remember God is always for us, and it is He that we are to give our best to, no matter if man gives us encouragement or not. And I believe it's important to remind those we're encouraging as well, because there's times in life where we're not going to get the encouragement from man, but the Bible talks about that. God is the one we're supposed to do it to, and that's part of maturing and growing as well. Let me just boil encouragement down to what I believe it is. Encouragement comes from believing the best about a person, and encouragement gives confidence to that person. Isn't that what God does for us? When we are despondent, when we fail, He always believes the best about you and I, and He gives confidence to us. It picks us up, He lifts us up, and we move forward. That's really our function as leaders. That's what encouragement means. Do to others as God has done to us. We have to remind the people that are following us that failure isn't fatal. It's just an opportunity to grow. So there you go. The 4 principles of the staff of direction. 1, you got to know where you're going. You got to have vision. And you need to get out front of the flock, of the people you're leading, and communicate to them where we're going and lead them. 2, when directing, use persuasion rather than coercion. Give your people freedom of movement, but make sure they know the boundaries, where the boundaries are. Don't confuse boundaries with bridles. Don't be a micromanager. 3, when your people get into trouble, go out and get them. Rescue them. Deal with it quickly. Don't let the small problem become a huge problem. And the 4th and last principle, remind your people that failure isn't fatal, but encourage them all the more. So remember, this Sunday after church, we're going to have our quarterly leadership meal and meeting. At this meeting, we're going to dive into what vision is and how to keep moving forward in what God has called us to do. 2, we're going to have your pictures taken for the leadership board. So if you and if married, your spouse, please come dressed in some nice casual clothing, and we're going to get great pictures to update the board. And 3, please have watched videos 1 and this one, obviously you are, and have read chapter 10, the vision test, in your book, 21 Tests of an Effective Leadership by Larry Kreider. I want to thank you for being faithful to the call on your life, and I look forward to worshiping with you all on Sunday and gathering together Sunday after church. I'll see you then.